Hi, I'm Miško. I'm the CTO at Builder.io, and I've done these things called AngularJS, Qwik, Zone.js, Clean Code Talks, and I had something to do with Karma. So I've been around for a while. Hopefully, you've used some of these technologies, and I would like to show you today how we are changing the industry again with Qwik. And so a little bit about Builder before we get started is we do kind of 4 different projects. Specifically, our commercial side is we do this thing called Builder, which is a visual CMS. What it is a drag and drop technology for your technology stack. What we mean by that is, let's say you have a React application or Angular application or any of the existing technology stacks, and it's a full-on application, and you would like to enable your marketing team to be able to drag and drop components and build up websites like landing pages or change the homepage of your site. You just do npm install the builder slash SDK dash whatever technology you have, like SDK slash React or something like that, and off you go. And you can basically enable your marketing department to change your homepage. We also do this thing called Qwik, which is a framework really focused on performance in terms of a startup performance. We can talk about that more later. Because we care about performance for our customers, Qwik is kind of the framework for that. We also have this thing called Partytown, which you can see over here, and that's for executing third-party code in a web worker, because a lot of third-party code is actually the thing that's slowing down your website. And finally, we have this thing called mitosis, which allows you to write code once and generate canonical code for a specific framework. So this is actually how we get Builder working with all of our existing technologies. So like we support React, Angular, Svelte, Vue, Qwik, Solid, and many, many more. And so instead of writing the SDK for all these things, multiple times, we write it once, and then we use something like mitosis to kind of generate all this stuff out. So I think the best way to kind of show you about how to work with Qwik is to kind of do a demo. So let's just get into it. And by the way, I love questions. I keep chatting, etc. If you want to interrupt me at any point and ask a question, I am all for that. That makes it more fun for me. It makes it less monotonous, etc. So either raise your hand or just shout out and let me know. Oh, I see also, I see that people are also on the chat, so I'm going to try to keep the chat open as well. Include some of my dad jokes. Yes, I'm known for having really bad dad jokes. Even my kids complain about my dad jokes, and I have a big repertoire of dad jokes. I keep them in my database. Let's get started. Okay, so how do we get started? Okay, so let me make the font a little bigger. And we started by npm create Qwik at latest. Oops, I just put a mistake. And so this is how you install a Qwik project. And so in this case, let's do Qwik dash, let's just call it London. And we're just going to take basic Qwik-City. We're going to install everything. And so that creates our Qwik repository. So let's go into it. London. And let's put it up. And full screen. Okay. And once we get it opened up, we can get it started by doing npm run dev. And that gives us a port number. So let's grab this and open up a new page. Oops, that's not the right window. That's the right window. Okay, and let's get the font a little bigger. Okay, so this is kind of a starter page that contains your basic things. Now, things to kind of keep in mind here is Qwik-City is kind of like the meta framework that other frameworks come with. So Qwik is like Qwik is to React as Next.js is to Qwik-City, right? So we have a meta framework which has routes and can do lots of other things. So let's try to kind of build something. So this is kind of a starter to kind of get it going. Let me show you routes, and I think the font needs to be bigger. How's that? Okay, so we have routes, and inside of the routes, we have the index TSX. So that's basically pointing to this URL because it's in the base one. And there's also a layout file which contains your header, your footer, etc. So the stuff you see around it. So let's create a new route. So let's go here and let's create a new route. So let's say I'm going to be building like a contacts application. So let's say we want to have contacts, and we want to have index.tsx. So this is how all of the routes kind of start. And in here we say we have to do default export. And we do component, and we say return with hello world. And we import this. Okay, so now we created a /contacts URL. So let's go into here and type /contacts. And sometimes the beat needs to be restarted when you create a new route. So there we go. So we have our new route over here. We created contacts. Now notice what you see here is that we have hello world, but we also have some layout stuff that happened around it. And that's because the way the routing works is that we have our component, and when you go up, you can see that there's a layout, and this layout is what controls this section over here. It also has its header. So if I go to the header, you can see that there's a Qwik logo, there's links, tutorials, etc. So there's a whole bunch of existing components that show up around our hello world, and we can control this by changing the layout, etc. I'm not going to go too much into it, but just the basic idea that the layout kind of controls what you see around it. Now, the thing to kind of show off here is that if we go to the network tab, and let's clear this, let's make this bigger. Okay, so here's our app, and if I refresh it, notice I have two JavaScript files that load. Those are part of Vite, and they provide hot module reload. So if I go in and I do more exclamation points and I go over here, you can see that it automatically reloaded without me having to do anything. And that's done. That's a standard kind of feature of Vite. And so I'm just going to say, I don't care about Vite. Vite is not part of this particular page. So I'm going to filter it out. And what I want to show you is that if you select just the JavaScript, you notice that there's no JavaScript present on this page. And this kind of makes sense because, well, there's no interactivity. So, why would we kind of want to do anything in here? And so let's start building a contacts list. So I have created for myself, I'm going to cheat here, and I'm going to grab some file. And 1 second. Okay, so let's say I want to display some contacts. So I'm going to create a file called fake db. Okay, because I don't want to go through the whole trouble of creating, attaching a database, etc. So in here, I created a fake database. I'm saying it's a contact. It has some properties, right? So this is TypeScript, and I'm saying my contacts contain these particular people. And so this is just static data. In real world, you would say you would have some real database, etc. So we're just kind of cheating in here. So now let's say I want to show that data. So what we need to do is we need to take the data from the server and transition it over to the client. And the way we do that is we create what's known as a loader. So we export a contacts loader. Oh, sorry. This is a new feature, and it is not in here yet. And I forgot I have to do a little update. 1 second. We have not updated our thing. So I just have to grab the latest version of Qwik-City to get that feature. 1 second. So back here. All right. So now we have the latest. I should be able to import loader. Here we go. And so loader is just a function that returns some data. So in our case, we'll just return the contacts, right? It's from the fake database, but this is where you would do put real code which talks to your database, right? This is where this would go. So we have contacts, and we want to now get a hold of this in here. And so the way you do that is you would say, oh, autopilot is so nice. So we say contacts, we grab the contacts loader and not get, but it's use. And we get a list of contacts. And now we would like to display them. So let's do that. So this, wow, okay, look how good autopilot is. Why are you complaining? Because that's a contacts array. Oh, sorry, it is that value. Autopilot is good, but not that good. Okay, so now that we have this, and if we go back to our application, we can see that the list of contacts are in here. And this kind of is worth kind of talking about a little bit, because first of all, again, notice there's absolutely no JavaScript being downloaded. The system kind of looked at all the components. Remember, it's not just the component that we have written, it's also the component that represents the header and the footer and the head section over here. These are all different kind of components that build up our application, and none of those needed to be downloaded. So we're still basically producing code that has zero JavaScript. And so the other thing that's kind of interesting is that you need to think about where the code is running. Normally, when you have a situation where you're running the code on a server, and then you have code that can potentially run on a client, and I'll show you kind of how this works in a second, you can't just do this, right? You can't refer to a function that is on a server. That just doesn't work. But Qwik has this magical $, which some functions end with. And what that allows us Qwik to do is to break up your code into individual pieces and then run the piece of code that's behind the $, either on a server or on a client, or maybe don't even ever send it to the client because it doesn't have to be there. And so this is a kind of our clever way of you as a developer. You don't have to think about where the code really has to run. You just kind of build this out and things work naturally. So let's add some behavior to this thing, right? Because this doesn't really do much. So let's say we want to have a filter, which is going to be use signal. So signal is kind of our state management. There's also use store, but let's just focus on signal right now. And let's say that the initially filter is just an empty string. It's just complaining that I've declared something that hasn't been used. So what we want to do is we want to filter this code out here. And so we're going to get a value, and we want to decide if we want to look at this particular filter value. So let's say for now, I'm going to say true, which means all values are going to be present, and I'm going to have to say create input. And I always get this wrong. So it's on value, no, on change. It's on change. Let's see. So we have an element. No, that's not it. Autopilot is not doing the right stuff. Value is equal to a.target as HTML input dot value. Okay. So what we do here is we basically have an input, and we maybe let's say placeholder search. And now we're basically saying that if we change the value, if you start typing into the filter, I want to update the value. And so let's just print out the value for a second here. Just going to make it simple, put that value. And so let's have a see what we have. So as I, oops, I have to refresh. Oh, okay. Refresh. Oh, sorry, it's the wrong thing. I always get this wrong. It's not on chain, it's on, what is it?
On input, maybe?
On input, is that what it is? Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, I always get this wrong. There we go, that's on the, okay. So, as I type, it changes. So the thing to kind of point out here now is, hey, there's no JavaScript present. And when I start entering here, some JavaScript shows up. And this is kind of the magic of Qwik, because the only JavaScript that showed up, if you look at it, is the thing that did the assignment here, right? The filter.value equals e.target.value. And of course, the framework itself also shows up. So that's the framework itself. And this is the code here. So notice what happened. We wrote code in a single file. In a single file, we just put all the pieces together, and we just naturally wrote the code we wanted to write. Some server code, some client code, and actually to kind of make a point here, let's just say console log loading contacts here, right? So notice the server code prints loading contacts, right? This is the terminal for the server, and then on the client, when I go to the console. Nothing loads here. If I refresh, this is let me see if I can disable. These are the infos, all levels. No, I'm not sure how to disable the info. That's okay. We don't have the console log basically does not show up in here. It shows up only on a server. And when I start typing, right, the only code that shows up is this function right here. So this piece of code right here is the piece of code that's right here and nothing else, right? And you can see that the function we're exporting is contacts component div input on input, right? So that's the div, that's the input on input. So this is the only piece of code that had to be extracted in order to make the whole page work. So all other components that are on our page, the system determined without any kind of effort on the part of the developer that it's not needed. System also determined that it can lazy load these components and so on. Right now we're running in a dev mode, so all this lazy loading is disabled, but in production, there is a service worker that makes sure that all of the code gets prefetched, that gets bundled correctly, and all the other pieces. So there's a whole set of problems that you as a developer basically don't have to think about. But let's continue. So we wanted to change the list here. So let's change this a little bit. So say to lowercase. So we're going to grab the lowercase value. We're going to print the filter. And so in here, we were going to say, I think this is a contact. And so here we can say contact.name to lowercase includes filter.value. That seem right? Why are you not happy? Let's able to choose what? Wait, this was, oh, sorry, I forgot one more parentheses. There we go, okay. So now, if I type in my name, it filters out and only shows my name. If I say everybody who has a letter A, then it shows no. So everything works. And what's interesting is that as a developer, I didn't really have to think about how do I break the code up or etc. I just did kind of what naturally would come to somebody writing React code or any kind of framework that you have to write. You just naturally write all the pieces, and yet the behavior is only the relevant pieces that needed to be downloaded, right? So we downloaded the handler for the code, we downloaded the framework itself. In this particular case, we needed the JSX, so we downloaded the JSX. And what are the other pieces? Oh, this is the Qwik-City loading of the code, the loader piece of code, because we can update it. And so instead of downloading the whole application, the framework figured out what are the actual bare minimums of code that's necessary, and it only downloaded that pieces of code. So I think that's kind of a unique value proposition for Qwik. Okay, let's just, for fun, do a little bit more here. So we have an li. Let's say we want to have also an image. So source equals contact avatar. Oops. Okay. So now if you have the big ones, but of course then we need to style it. So we need to say use script styles. And I'm going to just cheat and put it directly in here. You can put it in a separate file, but let's just cheat and put it here. And I'm going to say image is a width. Let's do 30 by 30 border radius. it's 50%. So now I get small icons, and I think there is a vertical line middle. Is that it? There we go. And also, I don't want UL to list down now. Is that it? There we go. And then padding 0. There we go. So now we have our basic kind of search component with everything kind of working. What's interesting though is that this JSX here, or rather this styling over here, actually never gets downloaded. If you look through the code, you'll see that we downloaded the code, we downloaded the framework, we downloaded the JSX. Notice the use styles was removed. And if you keep going, you'll actually notice that the styles actually never got downloaded because the system realized that these styles, I think they would be probably here. Right, so these are our styles over here. You can see width, height, border radius, etc. And the system realized that those styles were required on initial render on the server, and so they were included with the server rendering. Also, they were scoped, as you can see. It's not just any image; it's the image specifically for that particular component. And once the code kind of downloads on a client, we don't have to worry about getting more styles because the system is smart enough to understand, like, oh yeah, those styles already showed up as part of the SSR, and therefore I don't have to download those styles further. Okay, so now we have this. Let's say we want to have a detail. So let's say we want to click on this particular thing. So let's
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, absolutely. Questions, ask away.
So we didn't download any code unless you click the input field, right? So which makes the initial load is very fast. So
Correct.
if we think like this input logic is quite complicated, and let's say 1 megabyte of JavaScript, which is slowing down the computation. So how that is going to work in that? I'm not sure if I was clear. So if that
I understand the question. I understand the question. So here is our production website. What you're going to see is that the service worker in production, there's a service worker, and this service worker prefetches all of the code and makes sure it's available. So if you look at the response times, they're extremely fast. And if I can click on, and if I click on the search, notice that the code shows up and it's instant because the service worker has already prefetched it. So not only does Qwik break up your application into pieces, in production, it creates the ideal size bundles, and it has a service worker that prefetches all of these things ahead of time, and then make sure that by the time you're ready to interact with it, all of the code is available. So even if this is a large piece of code, it will be available pretty quickly because the service worker is responding. So that's a very common question. A lot of people ask that. And it is something that we take very seriously, and we have solutions for it. So in practice, you just don't have to worry about it. The right things will happen. So even if you are in a slow connection or your connection is dropped and you do an interaction, the service worker would have already prefetched that interaction code ahead of time. And it can do that. Actually, let me zoom into this again. The reason it can do that is because when everything gets generated, there is a script tag here somewhere. Let me see if I can find it. No, that's not it. Is it? Sorry. No, that's not it. Oh, here we go. So we send an event to the service worker that basically says, oh, it is possible that the user will interact with any of these bundles. And so the service worker can go ahead and start prefetching these bundles as soon as the page loads. So hopefully that answers your question. Yeah, great. Thank you. Okay, where was I? Okay, so we wanted to create a separate thing. So let's create a href equals and this. Here we're going to say slash contacts slash, I guess that's the team. We are going to have a typed routes that are coming in the future, but for now, let's just leave contacts.id. Okay, so now when I go and I click on myself, you'll see that there is a new URL with Hevery in it. And of course, it says it's not found because the system doesn't know what to do with it. So let's create that. So if I go here and I say id/index.tsx. So now notice I created a new subfolder ID with brackets around it. And that's going to basically say, just extract this particular part of the URL. Again, I have to do default equal component. And just say return to. Okay, so now when we go here, sometimes Vite, when you create a new file, Vite has to be restarted. Oops, I forgot to import it. Okay, there we go. So now we have, we can go and click on one of these users and we can see the details. And so here we need to, again, get the data. So we go to export contact loader, loader. And again, I'm going to just cheat over here and I'm going to return contacts. Find, is it find? Yes. Contact ID, of course not, it's not going to be the one, it's going to be params. And study equals params. Oops. ID. Oh, sorry, I think it's ID just. What am I doing wrong?
Do you need to destructure the params?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. There we go. So let's do that. And then here we will say ID. Yes, see, it says loading Adam Bradley. It's correctly printing it out. And so hopefully this thing is returning the correct object. So let's have a, we do contact. Yep, that's right. And so let's say we do H1 and say contact dot value dot. There we go. So we have Adam Bradley. We can add image to it, right? Just like before. There we go. And we can add styling just like before. Scope styles. It's just inline it for now. Yeah, image sounds good. And say height. Okay. So, so this kind of works. And again, we have the situation where we have a loader. Now, one thing, let's say we wanted to do with contacts is, let's say we wanted to delete this particular item. So for that, we have something called actions. So let's delete contact action. And we have action and I think it's form. So we're going to do something const ID equals form dot ID. And we're going to print that. We're going to have to input this. Okay. Oh, I think it's good. And so now we would like to perform this action. So we can say const delete contact. Yep. And so in here, we need to say form. And in the future, we'll probably have a more succinct way of doing this, but for now, let's just say include type ID. Yep, that's correct. And button delete. Okay. So now we have a button here that we can hit and delete. Now, if I click delete, as you can see, it says deleting contact Adam Bradley, but that's just a console log. It doesn't actually do anything. So let's now perform the action. And in this case, I believe we want Redirect, yes, okay. So what we want to do is we want to say find index context ID, yep, very good. And splice, wow, autopilot, you're amazing. And then we want to redirect to contacts, and actually redirect has to be a throw. Right, so we do 3 of 2. Oops. 3 of 2. So now, when we have Adam, and if I hit delete, oops, I have to refresh. What's going on? Why is it not redirecting? There we go. So now notice we can delete a particular individual, right? So I can just go in here and perform a delete operation. Now, what's interesting about this now is that you can see that, when you first render the page, there's no JavaScript, and if you interact, you get JavaScript. But notice if I disable JavaScript, JavaScript, so now no JavaScript is running. The page still works. We're doing the round trips now instead of doing everything on the client. So if I click on it, no JavaScript shows up because it's disabled. I can go and click and delete, and notice it still got deleted. So even though we usually run the code on the client, it actually runs in both modes, even if you have JavaScript disabled. Now, nobody in the right mind disables JavaScript, so that's kind of not a real use case. But the reason we support this is because we really want to have a really good SEO story. And so if you think about it, if you disable JavaScript, it is literally what the search engine sees. And therefore, it is the thing that it will be indexed. And so Qwik applications are really good at getting a good SEO because from day one, they are meant to be SEO first, right? If you think about it, if you're using a different kind of a framework, the SEO is kind of an afterthought, right? Because the frameworks really focus on client-side rendered application. And there are meta frameworks like Remix or Next.js that kind of give you the SSR story, but Qwik is different in its that it's like from day one, it's all about the SSR or SSG, and then bring in the JavaScript as necessary, and that's what gives it a good performance for getting a good startup performance. Let me pause here and see if you have any questions.
So I have a question, like you use the state to navigate between the pages, right? So if we have to use like query strings to navigate, does it work the same way or?
Yes, they work absolutely the same way.
Okay.
So you can ask for is it search query? There is something you can ask for. You can certainly get a URL from which you can get, I think it's the query right here. So here you can get a query parameters if you wanted to. So all of that stuff is available just like you normally would. I think that the point I'm kind of trying to get across is just how little JavaScript there is and how the JavaScript is tied to you're writing an application. You don't have to think about like, is this code server? Is this code client? Can I refer to it? When do I break it up? Where do I do lazy loading? If I do lazy loading, how do I prefetch the code? How do I serialize the state? All of those things are just built in for you. And so you can just really focus on building the application and not worry about anything else.
Okay, thank you.
I wanted to show you, and also I really wanted to kind of point out how the loaders and actions kind of work, because if you think about it, loader is the thing that sends data to the client, the browser, and action is the behavior the server can do by client sending data to the server, right? So loader is data going from the server to the client. Action is data from the client to the server. And there is a kind of a, in normal frameworks, you cannot do this. You cannot refer to a function that is on a server, because doing so would automatically pull that function in, and would first of all be unnecessary code that you're pulling in, but more importantly, this function probably does an import on a server-specific import like MongoDB driver or something like that. MongoDB driver is probably node specific. And so when you do an import that's node specific here, you need to make sure that that import only stays with the loader and doesn't accidentally get loaded with the client code, right? Because as we've seen is initially the client code is not present, but then when you type in here, then the client code actually downloads. So you can see that in this particular case, the client code downloads as you use it, right? So we're referring to our context loader, but we have to make sure that the context loader doesn't actually download. So if you go to the context index, this one right here, which is right here, you can see that the context loader has been removed, right? This URL basically disappeared. So every time you see a $, that tells Qwik that whatever is following may need to be lazy loaded or may need to only execute on a server or something like that. And so in this particular case, as you can see, the Qwik kind of realized like, oh yeah, the context loader symbol has to be sent to the client, but the actual content isn't needed because it's a server only code. And so it never sent this particular code. The other thing I want to point out is that when you have code in the dev mode, we send lots of additional information that's not present in the production mode. And this additional information basically tells us which file it is present, location, and the component. And so let me show you how that's actually useful. Let's say you want to know where the docs is over here because you want to change this to be, I don't know, docs exclamation point. So I can hit a Alt key on my keyboard and I can just click on, so let me refresh this. First, is it Alt? Yeah, go to source with Alt. Let's just go to the Qwik, I think because docs, here we go. So now you see how as I hover over things, it shows kind of a box around it. And if I click on it, it takes me directly to the piece of JavaScript that affects the docs. So I can now go and put exclamation points on it. And I can go back here and voila, the docs are updated. And so it makes it super easy to kind of work with the code base because when you are a new developer and you're not familiar with what's going on, if you want to change something, you can just hit Alt key and go to the application and then just goes in. This is specifically to in a dev mode. In production mode, obviously this doesn't work. Sorry, there's some questions here. Let me see if I can read them. How can I use Qwik for a homepage with builder, product list, category list, and product details and keep my current checkout flow written in Next.js and React? So we do have Qwik SDK. So are you trying to build the Qwik you're trying to use builder with Qwik SDK? Is that the question? Lars, this is for you, I guess, because you wrote the question.
Sure, I'll go in. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, it was just, we have a huge application. If we want to get the speed and the beautiful things that you're showing us with regards to very quick page rendering, and we want to use that for all the things that matters for us in Google. We run an e-commerce or several e-commerce shops, and we do not want to rewrite everything that we have in React with regards to checkout flows, etc. How could we have both Qwik running all of the product pages, product list, category pages, etc., using Qwik and keeping some things in React Next.js?
Okay, so glad you asked, although I am not, I didn't practice this demo, we're going off the beaten path, so I apologize ahead of time, but let's see if we can put React component inside of Qwik application. So if I do npm run Qwik add, I believe it is, now it's going to ask me, what do I want to add? And you can select React here. And so now that's going to add a React component. Let's see, React right here. Okay, so let's see what just got added. So if I go to React, oh, sorry, I forgot to run the server, npm run. Here we go. So here is a, we just added a React integration. And what it means is that Qwik can lazy load React code into itself. Now, the first thing, well, and that integration is done through the command you saw, npm Qwik add, and then we did React. And it created a demo for us inside of the React folder. And so let me just kind of take you through the demo. Again, notice that there's no JavaScript. Let me refresh. No JavaScript. And if I hover over certain ones, oh, it looks like if I hover over the slider, the JavaScript and the React code showed up. And that is because, let me see if I can find it. So we have a select option. We have material UI slider right here. And if we go into the material UI slider, right. So how this works is that we take a material UI component. This is a React component, right? We grab the button, we grab the slider. And what we do is we run a Qwikify function, which basically says, take this React component and wrap it into a Qwik component. So we get this kind of thing. And by default, we don't hydrate this particular component. So this component never gets downloaded. But in this particular case, for the slider, we say, actually, I want you to eagerly hydrate this component on hover. And so the behavior you get is that everything server-side renders because React knows how to use SSR and the whole thing is set up. And when I hover with my mouse over, it downloads the rest of the code. And this code includes the React, etc. And now I can use the slider to kind of update the application. And you can see that it updates the code. Now, what's interesting is when I hover, some code downloads. When I start dragging, more code downloads. Notice again, look at the network tab, right? Hover, whole bunch of code downloaded. Once I start dragging, more code downloads. And so the thing to understand about Qwik is that instead of being in this mental model where all of the code, all the components that are needed need to be eagerly downloaded before you can use them, Qwik is more kind of lazy about it. As code is needed, more stuff gets downloaded. And what this means in practice is that your application can really be of any size. It doesn't matter how big your application gets. It only matters what the user is interacting with, because the system will only download the code that pertains to the interaction that the user is building. So if you go to something like an Amazon page, when you hit add to the shopping cart button, then only the add to the shopping cart code downloads. The menu system, the review system, the product details, all of these other pieces of code, they don't need to download, they're not present, and so on. And so if you wanted to migrate your existing React application to something like Qwik, Qwikify for React is probably something that you would want to use. Like, again, you can see that we have a separate package for it, and then we can do that. We also, let's see, we're showing off a more complicated thing with a table application. Let's see if there's a table. Right. So again, let me refresh. No JavaScript. If I click show table, why is it not showing? There we go. If I click show table, the table shows up, and the correct code downloads. So this table was completely rendered on the client. There was no server-side code because if we go to there's a show, right? This table app is behind a show, behind a interaction. And therefore, the code doesn't download until you go and interact with it. And now it's a client-side behavior. So if I go to disable the JavaScript, this wouldn't work, right? Because this is completely client-side interaction. But you have a table that is a React component and React material design component running inside of the Qwik application. Hopefully that was not too long-winded and it answers your question. Okay, other questions?
Here, you showed earlier like the framework also getting downloaded.
Mm-hmm.
So that part also happens here, like it downloads the Qwik.
Yeah, that's right here. This is the framework, the core MJS. Again, we're in the dev mode, so the amount of code that we download is much higher. Let me see if I can. refresh this. Okay, so this shows you all of the code. It shows a huge amount of code because we're in a dev mode and we have lots and lots of comments inside of it. If we go to production mode, like this is a production application, and I do that and I refresh, and I'm interested in JavaScript, you can see that it downloads far fewer, right? So in this particular case, it downloads about 70 kilobytes to kind of get the page ready. And then if I go and I interact with something, state, let's say, then it goes and downloads it. So
Okay.
The amount of JavaScript you have really is dependent on how you use the application. So instead of, and the point is that as a developer, you don't have to think about it, right? Like typically when you are building an application, oftentimes you're going to run into a problem where like application gets too big and now you have to do lazy loading, and there's no easy way to do lazy loading. And so the nice thing about Qwik is that out of the box, without any sort of effort on a developer's side, things just kind of work in terms of lazy loading, right? So you don't have to think about it. Any more questions? If not, I want to show you one more demo.
It's too good to be true, like how it is working. But
Say again?
are you planning to? It seems too good to be true. What you are showing.
Too good to be true. Good. I love those words. Yes.
But I have one question. I'm mainly developing with Angular, so I'm not familiar with the React ecosystem. So are you planning to bring dependency injection in Qwik, or do you have it already?
Dependency injection is kind of a divisive feature. It is currently, well, we have something similar. It's called a context. It's not quite the same thing as DI, but we chose to kind of keep it more React-like because we wanted to appeal to the broadest audience. So as of right now, there is no dependency injection. It is something that we could add in the future, but the currently there isn't. It's not on a roadmap as of right now. Because it's solved, we have this other thing called use context, which is very, very similar to dependency injection. It solves the similar kind of use cases, and we just wanted to make sure that we keep it simple right now.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I wanted to show you, if you have more questions, interrupt me. If not, I want to show you a kind of a cool demo, which I think really demonstrates how things work. So let's go to contacts. So we go to contacts. Okay, and let's create a new component. So let's see, we are here, here's our contacts, and at the bottom, let's say we create a component called clock.
Could you talk a little bit more on what you mean by the context here? Sorry.
Yeah.
Sure.
So if you use context, here we go. And font reset. Okay. So context basically allows you to create some data and provide it. It's let's see, use context. That's not provider. Where's the example of providing? Here we go. So you create some state and you provide it, and then your child component can get a hold of it just like this. So it's the same exact idea as dependency injection, where your child component says, I need my context, or I need, user session, or I need something. And so they can just fetch it by saying, give me this thing. And then somewhere above, there is a provider that creates, that kind of provides this particular thing. So it's similar to dependency injection, but not quite the same thing. Does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, let me go back to the contacts, and I want to create a block in here. So turn block. And why is it not showing? What am I doing wrong? Return clock. Oh, sorry, I added it to the wrong place. My fault. So here's our clock right here, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the clock below the board. So I'm going to style this, and I'm going to just say height is 1000 pixels. Is that enough? No, not enough. Actually, before I do that, let me comment this up for a second. Okay, so let's make a clock. So a clock needs a time, and so we will say time is value, right? And of course, it's going to just say loading. So now I'm going to say use client effect. And so on a client, what I would like to do is update the clock. So I'm going to need, wow, autopilot, you're amazing. Is that correct? Yeah, it is. It is. And I'm going to default. Here we go. So now it correctly shows the clock, right? So if I refresh this page, notice that the clock had to show up eagerly, right? Because I want to update this particular clock every second. And so it downloads the client effect, right? It downloads just the client effect, nothing else. Just this function gets downloaded. And of course, it needs to grab the framework. And this kind of makes total sense because that's what the developers said they wanted, right? They wanted the clock to go and update every second like this. And so the system has no choice but to download the code eagerly and then stop updating the system. Now, notice what didn't download. We didn't download the clock itself. So nowhere in here are we actually downloading this component, right? This JSX never gets downloaded, nor did we download the parent component itself. So we're very surgical. We're just like, you just need to update the clock and nothing else. And so only that particular code gets downloaded. Now, let me uncomment this piece of code here. So all this thing does is it puts the clock below the fold. And now notice what just happened. The JavaScript is gone. You don't need this JavaScript. And when I scroll the clock into the view, that's when the JavaScript shows up and it starts updating the clock. And so without even kind of trying or doing anything special on the developer side, you kind of get this amazing behavior that is exactly what you want, right? Like a client effect says that I'm going to do something on the client, but if the client is, if this component is actually not currently visible, then you probably don't even want to do this particular code, right? And so you get this nice behavior that things just happen exactly when you want them. And so no JavaScript is present. When you scroll the component into the view, JavaScript becomes available. So how does this work? Let's see if we can, here's our div. And so here's our clock, right? So you can see over here. And what you can see here is that there's this Q visible. This is a component. This is a event that the system can do. And what we can do is we can mess with this. And we can just say, actually, it's on a click. Now, when I scroll the component into view, it no longer does anything. But now it listens to a click event. So if I go and I click on it, sorry, where did I mess up? Unclick, yeah. Oh, right, okay. My fault, because, right. So basically, the reason it's not working is because nowhere in the system did I create a click listener, and so the system isn't listening for the click listener. So let me cheat a little bit. What I need to do is I need to say quick loader, quick events, push, click. So basically telling the system, by the way, I care about the click events now. And so by doing that, now I can come over here and I can click on it and the application kind of runs. And normally you don't have to think about it because when the system is first, let's see, one of these things will contain style script. No. some of this code is, oh, here we go. Here is this code. So this particular thing says that in your application, we only have input and queue visible. Those are the only events that I have found, and therefore the system only listens for those events. And that's because, you know, we have our contact, right? So the contact is listening for input right here. And that's why input is over here. And then we had a client effect, which runs on visible, and that's what adds the queue visible thing. We didn't have a click event, and so the system's not even listening for a click event. But if you're going to go and mess with it, like I messed with it in this particular case, right? Let's do that again. I am now creating a new event. Where is this component? Right here. Okay. So now I've created a new event. And so, of course, nobody's listening on click. And this is the reason why I have to tell the system, like, now click events are also the things you should keep track of. And now when I click on it, it kind of brings it up. So you can see what this particular thing does. It says, like, when the click happens, this is the URL to download. This is the symbol to execute. And oh, by the way, you need to restore some state of the system. And so that's what the 0 is over here. I think we covered a lot. I don't know how we are with time, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Yeah, we've got anyone got any questions?
Maybe I can ask a tricky one. Do you have any use cases in your mind that we shouldn't go with Qwik over existing frameworks or libraries?
Yeah, that's a good question. So as of right now, so there's two parts to that question. So first of all, Qwik itself should be able to do everything that any existing framework can do. So if you ask the same question and you say, what is Angular, React, Svelte, Vue good for? Whatever answer you get there should also apply to Qwik. Now, having said that, right now, Qwik is our primary goal is to support kind of e-commerce-like applications. And so we are focusing more on adding features that are important for e-commerce. That is not to say that you cannot use Qwik for other things, but as of right now, we're kind of primarily focusing on this particular thing. So if you go outside of the e-commerce space, you might, if you wanted to build, like a typical SPA, you might run into like some problems around, I don't know, like maybe cookie management or something like that. It is not something that we typically e-commerce website. Well, cookie management is not a good example because e-commerce websites do have cookie management, so we have that as well. But the point is, we are kind of focusing on the SEO, where the SEO matters first, and so that's the primary use case we're focusing. But like Qwik itself can really cover anything else that you can think of, any third-party frameworks.
So can I ask
I
a
would love
question?
to try out.
Yeah, please do. We have Discord. A good place to go is to go to Discord, and you get lots of help from the community, etc. I think somebody else had a question.
Yes. So in my experience, the big culprit in web performance doing e-commerce in general is analytics. We need analytics. There's no way around it. Do you have a special take on analytics and Qwik?
We do. We have PartyTown, so you should go check it out. PartyTown is for you to take third-party scripts such as analytics and run them in the service worker. So if you go to our webpage, that's fine too. We're running analytics in here, but we are running it inside of PartyTown. So as you can see, Google Tag Manager isn't running on the main thread, but it's running on a web worker thread. And I can kind of show you how this kind of works if I refresh. Just a few seconds. Okay, so if you look at the flame chart here, let's look. This is a flame chart, right? Notice this is the main thread, and here's our worker thread. And so there's a PartyTown. So analytics, as you can see, analytics is super busy doing its analytics stuff right here. But that's in a separate thread, right? This is on a worker thread. And so it doesn't affect the main thread. As if you look at the main thread, all of these super tiny tasks that exist over here, those tasks are for answering the party time requests. So for example, the analytics might say something like, I want to know what the title of the page is, or I want to set up a click listener on your main page. And so all of these small tasks are doing just that. So they're performing whatever the Google Analytics wants to do, but you can notice that these tasks are super, super tiny, and the actual expensive stuff is running inside of the web worker, right? So this is the expensive bits. And you can see that roughly this chunk here, roughly in position, applies to this chunk right here doing all the work. So that's our answer. And because we have analytics, if you go to this page, and if you go to Google PageSpeed, right, what you'll see, these are core web vitals, right? This is statistics collected from the actual users, and you see everything is inside of green. Not sure why the time to first byte, we have to kind of figure out what's going on with our serving. But anyways, the whole thing is pretty much in the green, and so it gets a pretty good score, and we should be getting something in the high 90s. Here we go. So we get 95 score for our page, which is kind of unheard of if you've done e-commerce, right? For a page to be fast in rendering, and also, if I go back to a page, where is it, right? To have Google Analytics and to have, what do you call this thing? Whatever this plugin widget is as well, right? To have all of these plugins be able to run inside of your website and not affect the performance is kind of unheard of in the industry. If you look at most of the industry, these numbers are in low teens, not in the green section as well. I'm sure you have that experience.
Yes, thank you.
Other questions I can answer for you.
When do you think you will release the version 1?
Everybody's asking that. We are still working on it. One of the things we want to do is we want to publish a roadmap so that the community can see where we are. Guessing, it's very, very difficult to guess when things will be ready. I want to say it would be soon, on the order of like this or next quarter kind of a thing, not like multiple years, right? So we're talking about several months, not in kind of years, kind of a time frame. So by publishing the roadmap, I think it's going to become more obvious as to what we consider to be core to version 1 and what we consider to be features that we want to add later. I think the primary thing for us is that we want to make sure, for us, 1.0 means that you will have a good developer experience. We think feature-wise, we are pretty close to being there. It's just that we think if you start using it today, which by the way, companies already are, you might like come into like some issues, etc., something that is not working as well as it should. But we are pretty good about helping you if you ask on Discord, etc. We're pretty good about helping with that. But we are definitely looking at a couple of months basically to get there.
That's very nice to hear. And one more question: is documentation up to date of the latest releases?
Yes.
If you want to convert one application right now, yeah, I really want to try it out.
Yes, all of that stuff is check out the documentation on our Qwik website, and of course get on Discord. Discord is best. We have several people in the community who are big fans of Qwik and are helping to answer the questions, etc. So by all means, if you wanted to give it a try, you should do that. I think the value add of Qwik is that it is server-side rendered first, and it sends JavaScript only as needed, versus if you look at existing frameworks, the amount of JavaScript that gets sent to the server is overwhelming and just basically kills the site. Actually, let me just show this. Which one was this? Oh, here we go. So this is this page runs quick, and we kind of already looked at the performance numbers, right, of how these kind of look like. I can show you the same exact page, but I'm going to say render equals next, next.js. So this is the same exact page, render it using next.js. As you can see, next is in here. If I go to performance and I record, I'm sorry, not that, that's not the button I want to push. If I refresh it, you will see a huge difference in terms of performance of the two pages. If we go to the quick version, the thing to look at is this graph right here. How do I? Okay, so this is all the JavaScript that you, oops. Okay, what's going on here? Okay, so here we go. So we have about 400 milliseconds of script time that executed here. If I do the same exact thing on next.js, we wait, what's going on here? These numbers are not right. Oh, because I interacted with the page. Sorry, I need to refresh this. Doesn't count. Let me do this one more time. Okay, the amount of JavaScript that executed on this page is 97 milliseconds worth of, right? And most of it was, remember, because most of this 97 milliseconds is this thing right here, that basically party town code. And whereas if you go into the next.js, you see that the amount of JavaScript executed here is 500 milliseconds. So a huge, a step between the two. And really the amount of JavaScript that is on the page determines your performance, right? So by not executing JavaScript eagerly, and also if you look at the flame chart here, you will see a huge difference. Right, you will see this, just tons of stuff happening in it. And so you can look at, okay, so we'll do the same exact thing. Let's say we wanted to take about a second, the first second, tons of JavaScript that executes here. We go to the other page, you look at the first second, so that's about here. And you can see that so much less JavaScript is executing in the first second of the page life, right? And so that's the goal of Qwik, is that we want to offload the amount of JavaScript that the page has to execute. And that's how you get the performance up, right? By not executing JavaScript eagerly, there's two paths to it. For the first-party code, Qwik is the answer. For third-party code, Partytown is the answer. And both of these things are there to support our customers so that our customers can have, just unbelievable performance, unheard of performance in kind of the industry. That answer your question?
Yep.
All right. What else can I answer for you? Oh, somebody's asking, how do we get the same developer experience as we have Vercel? That's a good question. So we actually have integrations. Where is this? Here we go, integrations. If you look at the integration, we have the React, Partytown, Playwright, Vanilla Extract, Tailwind, and Test. And then if you go to deployments, we can deploy to Azure, Netlify, Cloudflare, Vercel, Node.js, and Cloud Run. So we're kind of covering all of these things. So with Vercel, if you wanted to deploy to Vercel, you really just have to run this piece of code, and your application should be running in Vercel. So all of these use cases are pretty well covered, I think.
How does Qwik work well with web components? I guess there should be no issue, right?
It does work with web components. So in that sense, it's just like any other framework. It works with web components just fine. However, I really want to stress that the point of using Qwik is to do as much SSR as possible, right? And web components don't really have a good SSR story, and web components will force eager execution of JavaScript in the client. So yes, you can use web components, but you'll be surprised that the use of web components will negatively impact the startup performance of the system, right? So the Qwik is doing all this work to make sure that no JavaScript gets sent eagerly to the client. And if you start using web components, then you're kind of undoing that particular thing. So yes, you can use them, but you kind of have to pay for them in terms of performance, right? And this isn't anything worse than any other framework. It's just how web components work. So again, like while you can use them out of the box, that's fine. We don't really recommend them because it kind of goes against our philosophy. And our philosophy is that you should just serve up just HTML. And then as the user interacts with the page, you should serve up only the minimal necessary JavaScript for that behavior.
Yeah, that's really good to know. I mean, in my company, we have design system, which is built in stencil.js. And we have a lot of containers and a lot of different applications built in for us to use by other teams. Some of them are Angular libraries. So that's why I asked. So that will be my first step to try it out.
So our answer for the design system is this thing called mitosis. In mitosis, you write your code once using mitosis, and then it will generate you a Vue component, a React component, a Qwik component, Angular, Svelte, and so on and so forth, right? So just about any, even web components, right? So if you would write your design system in mitosis, then the advantage is that you would have a solution for whatever your subteams are using. So if subteam A is using React, I'll get native React components. And if subteam B is using Angular, then I'll get a native Angular components and so on. And there is actually already a framework out there. Let's see if I can find it. I always forget the URL for it. Here we go. So there's Papanasi.js, and so it is a library, a UI library that is written once, but then it's generated for Angular, Preact, Qwik, React, Solid, Svelte, Vue, and web components. Right? So all of the components they have are available in all of them. And again, these are not like web components that are wrapped inside of other things. These are native for that particular platform. And that's what mitosis enables. Let's see, this is mitosis, right? So because you write the component once and it generates the equivalent component in the other technology.
Okay, this looks another insane thing. I mean, why I haven't seen this before.
That's why we're talking
Amazing.
and having meetups, etc., to kind of show off all of these cool technology. Anyways, hopefully you are super excited about this. We think this is pretty revolutionary and game-changing. So the best thing you could do is give this a try, play with it, and then give us feedback if something is not working so we can fix it. And once we fix all of these issues, we can release 1.0.
Yeah, thank you so much, Miško. Really great talk.
Anytime. Anytime.
Technology.
Any other questions I can answer? All right. I think that's it. Carly, should we call it a day?
I think we should. So thank you very much, Misko, for coming along and speaking to us. This was really cool. I've been meaning to play with Qwik for a while, so it's been nice to see it in action.
Yes, please play with it. That's the best thing you can do for us right now, and give us feedback.
Absolutely, sounds good. And I'm sure we've got some converts on as well that will do the same.
Sounds good.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for coming along, everyone, as well. And hopefully we'll see you at the next Front Engineers London meetup.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
See you. Bye.